Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this very special program where we are hosting probably one of the most important actors in the agri-input sector in West Africa. And today we are welcoming Mr. Innocent Okoku, who is the Vice President of the West Africa Fertilizer Association. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for being here.
Very briefly, tell us, what is WAFA?
So WAFA is the West African Fertilizer Association. It's an association of private sector players in the fertilizer industry across West Africa.
Excellent. We are going to break this conversation into various sections. So we'll talk a little bit about the outlook, so the current state of fertilizers and what we project it to be in the next 5 to 10 years. We would discuss a little bit about agri-input as a business, particularly fertilizers. We'll talk a little bit about the economic part of it, which I think it's important. The politics of fertilizers as well. So how is policy helping you to be able to grow? We know you're doing very well, and credit to you. But of course, we still have a long distance to go. And then we would also focus, I think this is important for us, to talk a little bit about how farmers do get the sort of bumpy harvest that they should be having. So let's begin with the outlook. So where are we right now with fertilizer use in West Africa at this point?
So currently West Africa unfortunately lags behind all of the other regions of the world in terms of fertilizer usage. I mean, I say so because the statistics have got it that today West Africa uses an average of 17 kilograms of nutrients per hectare, whereas the global average is around 100 kilograms. And there are parts in Southeast Asia.
That's like an 80% gap, right?
Yeah. And in Southeast Asia, people are using as much as 170 kilograms per hectare. Brazil actually uses in excess of 200 kilograms of nutrients per hectare. So this is the reason why many of those regions are able to produce a lot more food for themselves and export, including sending a lot of their output to our part of the world.
Does that explain why we have a lot of low productivity in,
that's definitely the reason why
food production in West
because
Africa?
To produce good food, you have to be able to take the nutrients from the soil. We've been using the same soil for a long time, and so we're taking the nutrients from the soil, and we're not returning sufficient amount of the same nutrient to the soil. Therefore, every fresh planting you do on the field is unable to get enough nutrient to support itself to produce as much as it should produce. So definitely fertilizer is a key input to getting the output that we desire. So the fact that we're not using enough fertilizer is one of the biggest reasons why we lag behind, in terms of agricultural productivity and production as a sub-region.
I just failed to mention that we would have a youth dimension to this conversation.
Right.
This is in part because most of the target of the Agripreneur TV, it's mostly young people, and we will talk about that in the agri business section of this discussion. So you just said that compared to the rest of the world, we are really right down there, 17% kg in West Africa. So how do you solve this going forward in a way that we can either get to the same level as other areas in the world?
Okay, so there are a number of factors to solving it. I mean, the first thing to say is that it's not a problem that one individual entity or an individual part of the whole mix can solve. There are areas of policy, there are areas of private sector investment, there's area of financing, there's area of technology development, there's area of education among the farmers. There's behavioral change that is needed among the smallholder farmers, which predominates agricultural landscape. And of course, there's the area of getting more people into agriculture, especially the youth. Our farming population today is dominated by the older folks, many of which are rounding off their tenure on the face of the earth, and that's why you've got a problem with agricultural production. We don't have young people coming there. People want white-collar jobs, want to live in cities, and because farming is done a lot more in the rural communities, youth do not want to go there. So there's a lot of factors that need to come together. Let's
examine some of those issues one after the other. Let's take the policy side. Right now, do you think the policy helps or inhibits the growth of the agri-input sector, and particularly fertilizers? We are more focused on fertilizers right now.
So in terms of policy, I think the governments of the sub-region have got nice intentions. They've got good intentions about promoting the use of fertilizer, but the issue have been countries doing exactly what they have committed to doing. I'll give you an example. ECOWAS have got a regional policy for fertilizer use. In 2006, countries across Africa came together and decided that they should move fertilizer consumption from the then less than 10 kilograms per hectare to 50 kilograms of nutrient per hectare over a 10-year time frame. That should have ended by 2016. This is 2020. We're still at 17 kilogram per hectare. So in terms of, did they agree? They agreed. But the question is that, did they put their money and their action behind that agreement that was reached in 2006? The answer is exactly not. The answer is a no. Okay. Because if you look at the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, most of the countries are not funding agriculture to the level of 10% of their annual budget. Right. So if you don't do that, then you really, if you have a sector that employs like 70% of the population and you're not funding it to the extent of putting 10% of your budget behind it, then really you're not keen to open up the sector as it's supposed to. So
somehow you want to argue that the states really need to put their money behind the strategies that they put in place.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the financing. You also said that's probably an obstacle.
Oh yeah, that's definitely an obstacle.
In what way? Let us know.
So generally the finance sector, especially the banks and those institutions, see agriculture as a high-risk sector. Therefore, they don't finance agriculture the way they finance other sectors of the economy. I mean, people who are doing trading, people who are in oil and gas, they get a lot easier finance. And many of our financial institutions are looking at quick wins. They want to put money into a business today, get it back tomorrow, and make like 10–15%, which is not the case with agriculture. Right. So our banks need to think a lot around how to finance agriculture. They need to see agriculture as a sector that actually sustains the entire livelihood in the sub-region. It's not just about making money, it's about keeping the human beings that are in the sub-region alive.
And this is a very important topic, Mr. Okoko. So, I'll just cut it short just for 1 single second, because we're actually meeting here in the early part of February 2020 in what you consider to be a gathering of partners to be able to see how you can find solutions to some of this problem. Right. Would you want to say that the ongoing partnership and dialogue forum, the alliances that have been put in place by CORAF, supported by ECOWAS at the political level, that it could be a solution to some of these problems?
That could be the beginning of the conversations required to have a very broad multi-stakeholder structure that comes to think alike, work together. Because again, a lot of the development efforts across the sub-region have for a long time worked in silos. And therefore, you find everybody, sometimes you find people replicating the same thing, whereas there's a major gap that nobody's fixing. And until the pieces of the puzzle come together, you can't have the change that we desire. So, but what is not obviously here at this conversation today is the presence of the financial institutions at this stage. So, of course, when we start talking here,
development bank.
Yes, AFDB is here, but AFDB is here, for example, on the platform of TAT. You see, and TAT is more like, disseminating technologies. That's a bit different from financing, businesses, financing farming, financing agriculture. I remember in October of 2019, from WAFA, we did hold a 2-day, full 2-day forum with AFDB to try and find solutions to financing problems for fertilizer in West Africa. We made a few ideas, but we are still, the track is a bit slow in terms of moving that to actualization. So I think a lot more needs to be put in that direction. If government needs to find a way to help those kind of institutions to subsidize finance into agriculture, they need to get in there. Really, our people need the finance to unlock the agricultural space, especially fertilizer, seeds, all of the key inputs required, and even value addition. There's a lot of investment required in agriculture.
That's really very critical, and I couldn't agree more with you. You just talked about education as well as being an impediment, and that you need to do a lot of work in that area. And talking about that, of course, this is something that I wanted to ask you. What does WAFA do? Because I suspect that if the farmer doesn't have a proper understanding of the soil quality, the soil characteristics, and even just how you use the fertilizer itself,
absolutely,
you're not going to be able to get any value for it.
You're right.
So how do you work?
WAFA's strategy in that direction is, let me first of all say that WAFA is relatively new as an association, was created in 2016, and set up a 5-year strategic roadmap only in 2019. And there are 7 pillars to that strategic roadmap. One of them is farmer education, improving the knowledge of farmers about how to use fertilizer correctly, about how to grow their crops correctly. It's not just fertilizer, it's fertilizer and good seeds and good agronomic practices and all of that. So right now we're developing what we call our product stewardship manual, a manual that will be used to train farmers across the entire West Africa. And once we do that, we roll it out through our members in their respective countries to train farmers that are within their network, farmers that they're reaching through agro dealers. And the idea is that we want to also, part of the conversations we're having here is to bring several other development partners to join forces with us so that we can scale up that kind of effort.
And I think we should just benefit to talk a little bit about WAFA for a second. So how many countries are you in?
So WAFA has got today members from 13 out of the 15 ECOWAS countries. The ones that we don't have members retailers are really the smallest ones where you don't have real fertilizer businesses.
Right.
And we're targeting the public sector there to open up the space and allow private sector to get involved.
So
that we
overall,
can
how many
have
members do you have?
Today we have 58 members. And
these are companies
these are
involved
big,
in the
these
fertilizer
are big
sector.
companies, from the biggest to, you know, the real big companies. Let me give you the numbers. So all of WAFA members put together do business per annum in excess of $1 billion. These companies represent more than 85% of
West
the total
Africa in
volume.
total.
Yes, of the total volume and value of fertilizer distributed in West Africa. So when you look at the fertilizer business in West Africa, the only ones that are not here, the only volumes that are accounted here are volumes that government is directly procuring from different places.
You have
all
to
of
be
the
commended, Mr. Okoko.
So this is where we are.
Because unlike there's also another alliance for the seed sector,
Yes.
and which was created fairly earlier than you,
Yeah.
And you were created in 2016, but right now, based on the data we have, we understand you have $200,000 in your account, which is your proper money.
Yes.
It's not donor money.
No, it's not.
You must be commended for that. How did you get that, just in a few words?
So I think it starts from the beginning. Let me correct something. People think when I hear the word created, it looks like somebody got up and said, oh, we want to form them. No. The industry players in the fertilizer space came together and understood that there is a need to have a common voice to create a platform where we can speak to public policy makers. We can invest and put efforts in changing the landscape where we operate. Now, if you're in a business,
this was initiated by
this was really initiated by us. So all that we got was support from development programs who saw the genuineness of our interest and our
Thank you
objective.
for making that distinction.
And came
you are
to
not
comment.
donor-driven, as a matter of fact.
So when you have a system like that,
Right.
then it's very likely that you see people putting their resources in the objective that they have.
Excellent.
So that's why it was easy for WAFA. We have a clear-cut standard of membership fees, annual dues, and people are paying. All of that 200,000 comes from fees that have been paid.
Excellent.
You know, and
Great.
we're doing other activities. We're right now in the process of designing and rolling out other revenue generation activities that will move our post much higher. The objective is to, in 5 years' time, at the latest, get to a point where, you know, donor money will come only when the donor says, I really want to be
Excellent.
part of this game.
Great.
It shouldn't be because there's really a serious need for it.
And if you're just joining us, we want to say that we are welcoming today Mr. Innocent Okoko. He is the Vice President for the West Africa Fertilizer Association. Let us focus a little bit on agribusiness,
Okay.
so fertilizer agribusiness.
That's right.
Because the youths, their appetite is being whet. They want to know exactly what you guys have in offer for them. What is it that youths, or what are the opportunities in the fertilizer sector in West Africa for young people?
So there's enormous opportunity. Just starting from the global outlook of saying today, West Africa people will use less than 20% of what we could be using. It means there's more than 80% gap in terms of value of products, in terms of market size.
Absolutely.
That needs to be filled. So there's opportunity, huge opportunity. If less than 20% is $1 billion, think about when you're at 100%, what are you talking about? You're talking about $6 billion, $6 billion
Absolutely.
market. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then it can be broken down. You've got people who are in primary.
I'll not cut it short.
Yes.
I'm a young man. I'm living in Bobo Dioula, so in
That's right.
Burkina Faso. I'm living somewhere, I don't know, in Tugnos in Niger. How do I, you know, if I'm interested, that process, of course, I suspect there's a long process to setting up and getting involved.
Yeah.
How do I get this done?
So okay, there are two ways to it. Well, you can want to get involved at a big scale. In other words, you're either manufacturing, blending, importing and distributing fertilizer big time, or you want to work at a retail level. If your resources cannot allow you, cannot raise funds to get involved at a big level, I encourage you to get involved at a retail level, meaning you can open a fertilizer retail shop where you're selling to farmers, and especially if you're an educated youth, you'll learn the basic, skills that's required for farmers to produce correctly. So you're not just selling them fertilizer, you are coupling that fertilizer sales with the knowledge that they require, so that every customer who works with you sees a bumper harvest and you're growing your customer base, and they're locked in, as it were, as we call it in marketing. But that's
in the $1 billion US market right now. Do you have young people?
Yes, we do have. We do have a couple of young people. We have a number of young people. I even know some of our biggest corporations where the real, people who are in senior management positions there are young folks. I mean, I for example, used to work for one of the big companies in the fertilizer space in Nigeria. I remember when we hired more than 30 different, extension workers, fresh graduates from the university who are already around. Some of them are becoming senior management staff now. So that's how we get. That's how it happens.
Does WAFA have a youth training, youth entrepreneur program?
WAFA does have in a stewardship plan, which are going to roll out over the period of 2020 to 2021. We're going to get it started on the ground, a youth engagement and training program. We actually do have on WAFA 9-man board a dedicated person dedicated to youth and gender integration on all of WAFA's plans. So that's extremely important. WAFA is also discussing with several partners to establish an education, I mean, maybe a post-university or a post-diploma education to get people understand how the fertilizer sector works and prepare them for better skills to be able to find employment and also do businesses within the fertilizer space. So yeah, WAFA has that in the plan. Like I said, 3 years is still a short time to expect too much from us, but I think it's been well spent 3 years. We have a strategy in place. We are now in the phase of gradually rolling that out. So for youth is definitely central to WAFA's plan. All of our farmer education plan will take youths and women as priority.
Excellent, great. Let us just focus for a while on subsidies.
Right.
And when we talk subsidies, we talk a little bit about policy as well.
Yeah.
What do you think, first of all? What's your take on subsidies?
You see, the thing about subsidies is this. Subsidies are...
And explain in very simple terms, what is subsidy to somebody who's not in the milieu?
So subsidy is somebody coming in to buy a product that is worth X amount of naira or dollar for less the amount, or for, let me put it back. It's somebody coming in to help you to buy a product that should cost X amount of dollars for less than that by paying the difference. That's what subsidy is. So essentially what the government does in subsidy program is help the farmers to pay some part of the cost of the product you have bought because of the understanding that the farmer's cash point does not have enough capacity financially to buy the product at the correct price.
Are subsidies still justified in the current context in most of the countries in West Africa?
So the issue is that subsidy have not been applied the right way in most of our countries. Now, when somebody needs to be helped to buy an input at the first time, the idea should be that you are helped at the first time to buy the input by being subsidized. But when you buy the input, you create an output that is of much higher value than the input you put in. And with that extra cash, you can then come back and be running your business independently. Right. Subsidy shouldn't be a perpetual way of life. So that's been the issue in many of our countries. It's become such... the practice has been such that subsidy have practically become a way of life. It looks like it must be a line item in every year's budget for many of our countries, and that's the trap, because it does not only place a lot of tension on the financial resources of the country. It makes the people develop a dependence syndrome.
And it affects your bottom line.
It affects businesses, Absolutely. And we think it affects the farmers much more than it affects even us who are in the business, because sometimes a lot of our members sell to government on the subsidy program, but at the end of the day, our smallholder farmers who are being subsidized, except you have a structure that allows them to see that they're supposed to move from being subsidized today to being independent tomorrow, they're going to be locked in a cycle of poverty. They're going to continue to think that they must be helped, otherwise they cannot live a life that is meaningful. And that's the greatest problem, one of the greatest problems we have with our agricultural system. So subsidies are good, but they're only supposed to be used to trigger, the growth of the farmers, bring them out of poverty, let them become self-independent, see their farming as a business, make money out of it. So that's the extent. So I think the subsidies principles should be adjusted. I know that ECOWAS has worked with IFDC to develop what they call a subsidy guideline. I think it should be deployed across the sub-region, and one of the key elements of that is that subsidies should always have what you call an exit strategy.
Absolutely.
A system where you get it started, you do a few years, the guy has the capacity to buy input by himself, and then you move it out.
Absolutely. Would handle two key areas. So the partnerships and the collaboration thing, right, we just talked a little bit about earlier on, and then we would be almost getting out of this interview. First of all, what is your take with respect to the state of partnerships today in the agri-inputs sector? Do you think that all the actors are working together in a way that they can deliver on what we expect, which is to get 100 kgs use of fertilizers, for instance? Do you think we are there? And if we are not there, what needs to be done? Are initiatives like the one that are being piloted right now, driven by CORAF, ECOWAS, UMOA, SEALS, the right direction to go?
I think we are not yet there, but I think the journey has begun. I tell you, 10 years ago, everyone, even within the fertilizer subsector, private companies only saw each other as competitors. It was difficult to form a WAFA at that time because everybody felt I can't be talking to the other company who is competing with me for the small market available, what I'm doing in my business. There's no need talking to each other. We don't need to bring opinion together because we should just be competitors. But that's wrong. Now the understanding is better. Now we can form a platform where private sector players and fertilizer can come together. We share each other's experience, we learn together, and we have a common voice, about talking to public sector, about our engagement in the downstream. So that's one part of the partnership. But then partnership with other forms of stakeholder is gradually coming. I mean, the kind of forum, the kind of platform that is created, and this is the second meeting that's holding. It's grown from less than 30 people or about less than 40 members last year. It's grown to almost twice of that this year. And private sector wasn't actually involved in that conversation last year. Private sector is on the table this year. So that growth is happening. As we continue like that, and we start listening to each other, and we start thinking about, let's find a solution to the food security issues in West Africa together, I'm sure we'll get there. Excellent. I can only encourage CORAF and all the other players who have been active in putting this together to not be discouraged, keep this team going. Good things takes a bit of time, and that's very important. I think CORAF should not relent by if they feel they are not seeing as much results as they want to see yet, they shouldn't relent, because it will take a bit of time for the actual results that we desire to show. But I bet you if you continue on this track, we will get there.
You were in Dakar last year in 2019 where this first partnership meeting held. We are meeting here in Abuja in February of 2020. In between that time, has the fact of you having been in Dakar and met some of the partners, can you be more specific in terms of an example where it was facilitated because you met in this meeting in Dakar?
Okay, so actually WAFA was not part of the meeting in 2019 in Dakar. Okay. But we've been engaging with some members of the partnership platform through other fora. WAFA has been part of the task force that is working with the consultants that are developing the ECOWAS 5-year integrated agro input strategy. Right. So because of that, we've met with several of the partners who are here as well. And we're building relationships. For example, give a specific example. Right now, WAFA now have a formal MOU with ECOWAS, which allows WAFA to stand as the private sector voice, counterparts to ECOWAS as the police, as the government public sector voice for the whole of the sub-region to discuss fertilizer issues. Secondly, WAFA has discussed and is in process of establishing an MOU with CORAF that will enable us to bring the synergy between the seed and the fertilizer sector, because both needs to go together. Absolutely. If you want to create increased food production and increase agricultural performance. So a lot of all the things.
Talking about that, there is on the table right now. So of course, you just talked about that. The design of an integrated agri-input strategy in West Africa.
Yes.
So it's fertilizers, it's seeds, it's also livestock,
agrochemicals, it's things for livestock,
and all of that,
and fisheries and forestry.
Right. Do you think it has potential to be able to make a difference?
It's got a huge potential to make a lot of difference. I like the process. The process is very inclusive. I mean, when the first draft was done, there was some components that was significantly missing. But once we got together as stakeholders, as the task force members, and we reviewed it, I'm happy with the fact that a lot of the inputs that were made were taken on board, and the next version reflected more the overall opinion of stakeholders. So if we continue along that process, we get it finalized, and ECOWAS and the partners support it to be rolled out and implemented, I think it's got great potential to move us towards the mark that we have in mind.
What is your support to research and development?
So at the moment, we can say WAFA isn't investing in research and development yet, and it's obvious we are still in our early days, but research and development is key. The other thing to bear in mind is that the definition of research and development is not, the right definition is not to limit it to the four walls of research institutes. On the farmer's farm, there's research and development. We are working with farmers to evaluate various fertilizer blends, do soil testing, and doing so. So all of that is very important. So our members are playing roles in that. We're directly engaging with research organizations to be involved in on-farm testing of various recommended technologies. Right now, we're working with IFDC and CORAF to try and roll out the FESOWAM, which is the fertilizer and seeds package of recommendation for priority crops across West Africa. So we're very keen on this. We're very keen on this, and I believe that with this broad-based partnership across the entire farm input sector, we can actually transform the space in which we all work.
We are almost closing this conversation. At the end of the day, if the farmer doesn't get the necessary inputs, in this case fertilizers, our work will not be complete.
That's right.
At what point do you think we would be able to say that we have done our job, which is to be able to get the seeds, the fertilizers, and every other input to our farmers?
Actually, at the point when buying fertilizer and seeds and improved seeds is like buying Coca-Cola. So you don't need to walk from your house. There's nowhere you are on the face of West Africa where you need a 30-minute walk from your house to find a bottle of Coca-Cola to buy. Just to give an example, we need to have a structure where farm inputs are that close to our farmers, at a point where a farmer can go to bed. Maybe he gets somebody's owing him some money. The person brings the money to him at 10 p.m. at night, and the man needs to be on the farm at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And between those hours, he knows where within his neighborhood, without going in the danger of the night so far, he can get those inputs, both seeds and fertilizer, and he's on his farm at 6 a.m. with those inputs to use. That's when we'll be getting it right. Things need to get to that level, and I think as long as we continue to work on this and connect with the last mile, the agro dealers, the network that deliver inputs to the last mile, I think we will get there.
Mr. Innocent Okooko is the Vice President of the West Africa Fertilizer Association. Thank you for talking to us, sir.
It's been my pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.